Good morning.
Good
Hello.
morning. Glad you found the Zoom link. Sorry.
Thanks for resending it.
No problem.
I thought just searching for Zoom link stupidly would not, throw 30,000 hits back at me. And it's like, crap. I get entirely too much email in a
I see
week.
you got your coffee.
I'm the odd one
Matthew,
out.
you're lawful good. By the way, by the how you hold your coffee mug. This is lawful good. This is chaotic neutral. This
Oh,
is chaotic evil.
I don't. I don't have a handle to be my true neutral self.
Stephen is just like,
And Matthew, have you taken an actual like D&D alignment test before?
No, I haven't.
Well, I always like to think I'm good, but I'm not good. I'm neutral. I'm apparently in it for myself.
true neutral.
It has this great description of like, this is the best alignment to be because it means that you stand by your convictions and you're not swayed by other people. And it's like ... Or it means that you're lazy and you're just kind of like lackadaisically going through life. And I was like, uh-oh, I think some of those answers, it's the latter part.
I love it. Although I'm quite sure that we have a good chance of finding no more validity for that kind of testing than we do for the Myers-Briggs type indicators.
Let's.
Oh man,
I need you to. Oh, we need Kim on here.
I've taken it so many times. I've gotten the same one, INTJ or something, and it's just. I think it compared me to like Gandalf, but also Putin. It's like, okay.
Why are those bad?
Well, the underlying scales are actually quite good, and people are reasonably stable in terms of the thinking feeling score or the introverted extroverted score. But as soon as you start creating these dichotomies, the underlying distributions are not bimodal. And so the vast majority of people are close to the median on most of these characteristics. And so the median split creates a false dichotomy, and they're just not stable. And if you're on the extreme end of all four of the dimensions, then you'll have a stable code. And so if someone like Vin takes it and repeatedly gets the same of 16 categories, then that's cool. Then it works. But the basic distributions are bell-shaped, symmetric, and most of the cases are piled up right on that split point where you get assigned to one category or the other. And so I get a different code every time I take it.
Oh, interesting.
Every single time, and without intending to.
So, I get the same one. But it is very confirmation biasy because you read it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess some people read it and go, this is stupid and false. But I read it and I'm like, oh, that is me. I like all those things.
Isn't the argument that some people that should be really close to you should take the test for you? Because if you take it yourself, there's just so much bias involved. I don't know if that's true or not.
That's a self-report bias, and we know that there are very systematic components to that. And particularly if you're taking it as part of a job application where you're deliberately and supposed to be putting your best foot forward. I don't want to hire someone who doesn't know they're supposed to try and impress me in the job interview. There's a certain emotional intelligence behind that. I don't want someone who's an aberrant self-promoter, who'll come in and say, blatantly untrue things that couldn't possibly be true about themselves. But,
that would be a wild metric to hire on, to me. I'm actually surprised that some of the distribution, that they are normal and symmetric. Oh, I'm conflating two things, thinking that normal and symmetric means there'd be like an equal amount of introverts and extroverts. That's not what that means.
It depends on what you mean by introvert and extrovert. At the extremes of the scale, if it's symmetric, then that would suggest that you do have equal frequencies if you block it into equal intervals, comparing, you know, the top 10% to the bottom 10%. But that normal distribution implies something beyond symmetry and beyond simply being bell-shaped, and starts to make very, you know, clear probabilistic prescriptions about how many cases should be seen in each of, you know, very narrow bands. So I don't know that the underlying dimensions are normally distributed, but they're probably bell-shaped.
Oh, okay.
There are few people who are exceptionally introverted or exceptionally extroverted. You know, the extremes are not nearly as common as people who are somewhat introverted or somewhat extroverted.
There's, yeah, when you take the 16 personalities test too, I think it gives you a percentage of like, oh, like 3% of people are this. You're special.
You're super special. Yeah. It's like, you're the rarest personality type. Like, okay.
It's so like, I don't know why it's so appealing though. Maybe it's back to like horoscopes and things like that. Because there's so many versions of those things. I guess we started off with alignment, where it's like, oh, I am this. Someone tell me what I am.
Well, you know, people like to think about themselves. They like to have, you know, some attention paid to themselves. And, you know, then you get this inherent, you know, feedback that, you know, you focus on the parts that match. You know, don't focus on things that don't seem to match, or you think of, oh, well, here's the way that I can reinterpret this. And so, you know, I think the analogy of horoscope is a really good one, because, you know, we're projecting our expectations and, you know, in interpreting what this means in a particular context. And so people will stop and think, oh yeah, there was a, you know, some times when I was, you know, very sensing in how I approached that task, and then all of a sudden they're, you know, they're caught up in it. So
if it was less bimodal or binary, would you like the Myers-Briggs more if it wasn't? I mean, I know there's percentages and it's a continuum. Like, is the binary part really the problem, or is just like the whole
it's
scales?
basically the false dichotomy. And for a lot of people, the dichotomization just isn't meaningful. And when you try and use those numbers in research, using the scales, we, you know, see that they correlate, you know, with things that they should correlate with. The introversion extroversion scale, for instance, has, you know, high correlations with other measures of extroversion or other measures of introversion. And, you know, so I have no problem with the you know, inherent underlying dimensions. There are potentially some more powerful ways to think about personality in terms of the Big Five, which has received, you know, more validation, and we've seen, you know, a lot more research for that to play out. But, you know, you get to the part that's powerful that people find helpful in interpreting it is when they go with the false dichotomies and they get this 4-letter code. And so, you know, if it helps you make sense of the world, great. You know, horoscopes can help people make sense of the world. And, you know, religion helps people make sense of the world. All sorts of things help people make sense of the world. And if it allows you to do your job better, fine. But you know, as far as research goes, there are much better measures of personality that have a much better proven track record.
Do people even use that anymore in like personality research?
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah.
It's a really fallen out of favor as far as personality research, just because there's now so much baggage, and one has to be so clear that, oh, I'm using the underlying scores, the dimension scores, and not the, you know, categories. So, but it's a longstanding beef of mine and pet peeve when we have graduate students who take perfectly legitimate, you know, continuous measures And because ANOVA frameworks are more familiar in psychology to start chopping them up with median splits or quartile classifications, and oh, now this is easier for me to think about. And it's like, yeah, but you just threw away a lot of meaning in your data and flushed a little bit of your ability to account for variance in the outcome down the toilet. So yeah, let's maybe not do that.
Well, that's a good dovetail into what we've been thinking about, which is power. Wouldn't you just throw away, you'd like half your power, or you'd at least half your sample size if you chop it into like upper 50, lower 50, right?
You know, we definitely lose power, and taking a, you know, false dichotomy, trichotomy, quadchotomy, those false classifications where there's not an inherently discrete set of distributions that match, we definitely lose power when we create an analytic framework that's not utilizing all of the information available in the original data. It's hard to express that in terms of, oh, it's the same as cutting your sample size in half, or it's the same as, you know, throwing half your data away. It's hard to know. It depends on how strong the linear relation would be without the false classification. And so it's, you know, numerically, it's not quite the same as saying you're throwing half your data away or half your sample size away, but you're throwing part of your sample away because you're not using all of the information inherent in the data. So you're losing some of your predictive power. Your effect sizes that you calculate will be weaker. And so all of your conclusions will be weaker as a result.
I see. Yeah, I've seen some people do that, whether it's, you know, quintiles or upper lower 50, and then try to upper 50 score higher on this thing, and the lower 50 have this other thing. I feel like it would almost just be easier to just do regression, just like it, if they correlate, right?
Absolutely. Abso-frigging-lutely. And it's crazy that people have, you know, such a strong I'm comparing groups mentality that they can't understand the, you know, the continuous nature of that prediction. As your predictor variable keeps going up one more unit, your predicted score on the outcome variable goes up by, you know, X number of units. And that it's a, you know, continuous, you know, making, you know, a 3-unit change is going to have 3 times the effect on your predicted score. You know, it's, in my mind, not that hard an interpretive framework, and yet, you know, it's not at all uncommon to see people finding the group comparison approach to be, you know, easier to talk about, easier to think about, and it's a shame. Now, when we get up to looking at, you know, a 3-way interaction, and all 3 variables are continuous, it gets very hard to talk about a 2-way interaction changing as your 3rd variable goes from very low values to very high values. I can see where, you know, the appeal of simple slopes comes into play, and let me calculate my 2-way interaction for 1 standard deviation below the mean on my 3rd variable and 1 standard deviation above the mean on my 3rd variable, and compare those 2 separate 2-way interactions to see how they're different. You know, okay, you know, I give in on that one. That's fine. I also find it easier to think about it that way. But yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I guess it's the same thing that we were saying with personality testing. It's just easier for us to bin these things, even if it's then, I guess, less accurate. It's just easier for us to categorize them.
Well, you know, it's a whole lot easier to think in dichotomous terms, and you know, we're starting with a very most basic dichotomy: us, them.
Yeah.
And you know, that same kind of, oh, it makes it easier. You're one of us, so cool. I don't have to think about it anymore. You're one of them. You know, don't piss me off.
Yeah.
Over there. Do your thing over there.
Right. There's just 30. There are 30 us groups.
Yeah.
Too many of them. But yeah, I don't have something quite as tangible in my field where maybe I do, like in a lot of nutrition type work. It's like, how can we categorize these people as like fit or not fit, or healthy, not healthy? And with a lot of omics techniques, I just see a lot of papers. I'm like, oh, a new index for categorizing people. It's like, I guess I do see the appeal of an index. It's just like, yeah, but now I know so much less about those populations because I just have a number. I guess it is easier to write about that way. Why can't we just keep it continuous and closer to the raw data?
Well, and the true meaning of the word index would imply a range of scores, like the IQ tests are thought of indices or an index of problem solving ability. And so, let's have a fit index that, might reflect your, ability to, sustain, athletic effort for, 30 minutes without stopping, or, in terms of, like the body mass index, speaking of indexes, was just looking at that in terms of the, COVID-19 vaccine criteria going into 1B plus. If your body mass index is above 30, then you qualify as an at-risk individual and can get a vaccine in 1B plus. So they took body mass index, which is, not the best of indices. And particularly if you're estimating it just using height and weight.
Not everyone's had their DEXA scan to look at percent body fat.
Yeah, exactly. So there are bodybuilders out there who are particularly short and particularly muscular, who using height and weight formula could, okay, hi, I'm here, I'm obese because my BMI is 38, 35, it's over 30, and so they're taking a continuous index and they're creating a cut score. You're obese or you're not, depending on your BMI being over 30.
But there's probably so many fewer of those people. Is it worthwhile to care about those or those edge cases? That wouldn't be a good thing to say to those people. Your
edge cases.
Beautiful case in England where someone's height, a guy is 6 feet 2 inches, and someone meant to convert that to centimeters, but they put in was 6.2 centimeters tall. And he weighs like 100 kilograms or something like that, and so he gets this body mass index that's off the charts, and they called him to schedule a COVID vaccine because of his outrageously high BMI, and they wanted to make sure he was one of the first people vaccinated, and he showed up, and they're just like, whiskey tango foxtrot.
That's so funny.
So fortunately they had the ability to pull up his medical records. He's like, I think I'm more than 6.2 centimeters tall.
Yeah. How to get to the front of the line the quickest. Everyone's just like stooping on their height, trying to get their BMI up. The one time it's helpful.
Exactly. The one time my fat ass saved my fat ass.
You're like, thanks, me. Thanks, past me. You're looking out for future you.
Well, and crap, as with this damn pandemic, it's just COVID-19 crap. We should call it COVID-40. Just be honest here.
Oh man,
25 at least.
We just eat our feelings as we hide in our holes.
Yeah, it makes me pine for the freshman 10. Jeez.
That was training.
Training for COVID, yeah.